Welcome to a special episode of SignalsAZ Podcast. I'm excited because I have Christine King. She's third floor manager of medical surgical telemetry at Dignity Health YRMC West. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Did you call me Christine or Christie?
Christie. I have multiple Christinas in my life, so I apologize. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm excited because, and I really am, when I heard about this, because I thought it was interesting, but not for maybe the reasons most people know. Today, we're going to talk about what's going on over at Dignity with virtually integrated care. In layman's terms, we have a remote nurse at somebody's access 24/7 in their room via high definition camera and TV screen, correct?
Yes.
I'm really dumbing it down to start, but basically you guys are employing over time throughout your rooms at Dignity Health YRMC, these nurses that are there at the push of a button through a remote screen.
Yes. And right now it is not 24/7. It is our goal to get to 24/7,
Okay.
but right now it is only day shift, but it's from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. So, but future state, it will be 24/7 and it will be at both hospitals and all of the patient rooms.
So it brings up the question as to why. Why is this being employed? There's some obvious reasons, but I see it as better care, number one. Can you talk to us about what was the motivation to do this?
Of course, like the number one motivation is always patient experience and patient safety. They go hand in hand.
Right.
But along with that, how are we going to keep up our patient experience and our patient safety with the ongoing nursing shortage that's happening at a national level?
Right.
So we have to make sure that we maintain our good care, and we have to maintain nurse contact and the special skill set and the expertise that those nurses have as we get shorter and shorter on nurses. So right now we are integrating them. We are learning how to use them. We are working with them. We are introducing them to the patients, and we are getting to be experts ourselves on how to integrate with this new model with the new technology to help us through the nursing shortage, and then to also, of course, provide the great care that we need to provide to the patients.
Right. One thing that came up, and I just want to get to it because it was exciting for me when I heard this, when I was initially talking to your executive staff about the virtually integrated care, VIC, is your industry, and I'd say nationwide, your industry lost a lot of people post-COVID, burnout, retiring early, I'm done, right? But with VIC, you guys have been able, and I should say, digress a little bit, in that exodus, if you will, you lost a lot of intellectual property. There's probably some very experienced people that just said, I'm done. So, because the people that were retiring were older and more experienced, right?
Yes.
So you have this influx of younger people, less experienced, industry-wide, nationwide.
Yes.
And how do we bring back some of that intellectual property so we can continue that great care that everybody expects, right? And VIC is doing that because people are interested in working in these nurses' stations remotely, if you will, at a very specific place that we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. So VIC has helped you guys bring back some of that intellectual property. Is that right?
Yes. And so that's actually our goal in recruiting too, is to tap into some of those skill sets that, they, like you said, they did retire. They took a look at their life and they're like, this is not where I want to be. I don't have to do it. And then, they just got burnt out from taking care of COVID patients day after day. And in their environment, if they could retire, they did. So we lost a lot of expertise. We lost a lot of good nurses because of that. And some of them are interested in coming back, and some of them miss the patient care. And this is a way to give them that patient care. also address their burnout and get them back into the work environment where they are working with other nurses too, and they miss that collaboration. And of course, their favorite part is always the patient experience and the patient care, spending more time with the patients because they have the time to get on the screen and talk to the patients and have those conversations and do a deep dive into what they really like to do as a nurse, which is be at the bedside and be with the patient.
Right. What I think of right away is I took a tour once of the Prescott Police Department's 911 center. And you have your officers there answering 911 calls. You had video. It's a really cool kind of place if you're in a tech. I kind of see it as that. It's obviously very different, but now you have these very experienced nurses that are, if you will, in this 911 center, I'm just for lay terms, and they are then contacted directly by the patient in the room with the push of a button. Camera turns around and turns on, and they're right there in front of the patient. I don't know what your goal is for response time. Maybe that's something you can talk about, much like what the police always have a goal of a certain response time. But they're verified right there that they can talk to the patient or they can see the patient's condition. And then they are helping to direct the nurses and the nurses' assistants and physicians' assistants on the floor for direct care. Is that correct? Is that a good way to kind of describe it?
It works both ways. Like the doctors and the nurses and their nurses' assistants can also pull in the VIC nurse, and then the patients could call in the VIC nurse. So how it works is that there's a screen in the room, and it's much, much more personal than the 911 center. But the screen in the room, and it has a little white call bell on it, and the patient can touch that, and then the virtual nurse will come on the screen so that the patient can see the nurse, but the nurse can't yet see the patient. So the nurse asks permission from the patient to turn on the camera, and what they say is it okay if I enter your room? And then if the patient gives permission, which they usually do, then the VIC nurse will turn on the camera and then be able to see the patient. Then they'll be able to have a conversation. There's a very good speaker in there so that the nurse can hear pretty much everything that's going on in that room, which is great because, like you said, the collaboration with physicians is also really important. So if a physician is in the room, that VIC nurse can hear everything that the physician says, and then later help with questions from the family, or if the patient may have forgotten a piece that the doctor said, then the VIC nurse can help clarify that with the patient too. So they can have that conversation. The VIC nurse also has access to that patient chart. So they can answer questions for that patient, and they can also relay information like, what were my last test results? If they have that question, then they can call the VIC nurse in. They can ask the VIC nurse questions. So I had mentioned that the VIC nurse needs permission to come in the room. So with some of our patients, the nurses like it if the VIC nurse would just check in with the patient every now and then. So throughout the day, at the beginning of the day, the VIC nurse would get permission from that patient and just say, hey, is it okay if I check in with you at certain points throughout the day just to make sure you're okay?
Like they would already do anyways, walk in and just see maybe you're sleeping.
Exactly. They would peek in the door in real time, if you're on the unit. And again, usually the patient says yes. And then so, at certain designated times, or maybe it's hourly, or maybe it's every 2 hours, whatever the nurse, the bedside nurse and the VIC nurse collaborate with, that VIC nurse will pop in and just check on the patient, make sure they're okay. As far as other things like helping out the bedside nurse, collaborating with the bedside nurse. So as you know, nurses, they have a load of patients
running around.
And of course, our goal is what we would really want is for every patient to think that that's their nurse's only patient, of course, right? But how do you do that with the patient load? Well, the VIC nurse really helps us do that. So for instance, if there is some things that two nurses need to do with that patient, like when we're administering blood, that requires a 2-nurse check so that, we want to get all the details right so that we're not making any mistakes. So the nurse can call in the VIC nurse. The VIC nurse comes in the room, and the VIC nurse has that fantastic camera, and they can zoom in on the blood so they can double check all of those details, how the blood is labeled, and they can check the patient's wristband, and they can verbally verify with the patient and the nurse that's in the room, so that the bedside nurse doesn't have to first leave the room and go find somebody else and come back in,
Right.
but they just have that nurse readily accessible to them. You mentioned response times.
Right.
So it is our goal, of course, to answer call lights as immediately as we possibly can. Our goal is to always have them answered in less than 5 minutes. And that is not different with the VIC nurses. So when they see a call light pop up on their screen, then we want them to be able to come in the room and answer the call as soon as they possibly can. So calling the VIC nurse in the room can be done by the patient. It can be done by the CNA, and it also can be done by the physician, by the nurse practitioner, by the housekeeper, by anybody that's in the room. They can just touch that screen, and then the VIC nurse can come in.
So I'm hearing a couple of really cool things. The first thing I hear is increased efficiencies, where because we don't think about it where we're in the hospital or a family member and we're waiting and we're frustrated and because we're anxious with a lot of anxiety. So we have a tendency to be critical of the care. The person giving the care is now you have nurses that aren't on their feet all day running around. Because if you think about it, a nurse is probably on their feet 90% of the time. Walking around on a hard floor, which is hard on your back and your feet.
Yeah.
And by the end of your shift, you're probably not that sharp nurse that you were, like all of us human beings. This way, you can give better care to more people in a shift than you wouldn't normally be able to do on your feet, right?
Exactly.
Because you're not literally going down the hall and going back and forth. That's the first thing I hear. So better care, more efficiency. Or enhanced efficiency. And then the other one is, it sounds like, and this is probably how you've attracted back some of those experienced nurses with all that knowledge, is you're bringing more value to the job for that nurse, because now they feel like they're not going to be destroyed at the end of a shift, but also they can be better what they love to do.
Yeah,
right?
the nurses, the bedside nurses, we've gotten a really positive response from them. They really like it. They have come to rely on it, which I think is great. Of course, at first, when you first integrate something like that, there is an element of trust. But once that trust is established and they get to know the nurses that are the VIC nurses, and they become part of the healthcare team, and someone that the nurse that's taking care of the patient at the bedside that they know they can trust to also be a nurse in that patient care team, then it's great. Everybody relies on each other, and we've gotten great feedback, and nurses having to even spend less time at the computer because the VIC nurses are doing that time at the computer. So that's been really good. Earlier, you mentioned an influx of essentially new grad nurses to replace the nurses that had retired. So we do have a fair amount of new grads at both of our campuses in Prescott, and really every hospital has a fair amount of new grads right now. And that's really good. We're really excited to get those new nurses into the industry and get them trained and retain them and give them a good environment so that they can spend their career being happy, because we really want our nurses to be happy. But with the VIC nurse, they can do some of that teaching with the new nurse. And so say we have a new grad nurse who has gone through her training. She's gone through her preceptorship. She's got a team by herself, and she has a question about something she's never experienced before, which does happen.
Sure.
She can, again, tap in the VIC nurse, and the VIC nurse is usually a seasoned nurse and has seen a few more things than a brand new nurse has, and can answer many of those questions. And so that eliminates a lot of footwork too. Again, leaving the room, finding the charge nurse, finding another nurse that might not know either, things like that. They can key into that body of knowledge so quickly and get their answer and carry on with their patient care.
It's kind of like you have somebody on your phone texting you, hey, how you doing? But now they're literally in the room. So to me, it sounds like a natural transition for most people that have one of these, which 99.9% of all people do, is now they're just coming on and saying, hey, how you doing? And checking in on you.
Yeah. And so I also wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like on the patient side, because that's how it creates efficiencies in the nurse life. And of course, there's, at least 100 more things that I'm not saying here.
I bet.
But for the patient, so like you mentioned, everybody has a smartphone right now. Most patients do have smartphones. And if their loved one has a smartphone too, and when the doctor comes in, when they have crucial visits with a nurse, stuff like that, the VIC nurse can come into the room and also zoom in the family member on their cell phone.
Nice.
And so they send them a link, and then they just tap the link, and then they're in the meeting, and they can see or they can hear, and then they can come on the screen and talk too. So like in difficult times, to where the family member might be in New Jersey or might not be able to make it out for this hospital visit for that family member, the VIC nurse can set up a meeting face-to-face on Zoom with a phone and then the camera in the room and the screen in the room. So that really elevates the patient experience too, because when you're alone in the hospital and you don't have anybody to visit you, not only do you feel alone, but less healing takes place.
Yep.
And so if we can get an environment where the patient feels supported and they feel the love of their loved ones coming in to visit them, all those types of things, it really does, it really creates a better healing environment for that patient. So
what I'm hearing is technology is not only increasing efficiencies, it's creating better jobs. It's creating a positive psychological environment for better healing and faster healing. It's one of those rare moments where technology actually is at this intersection where it's really doing good things, which is really great to celebrate. We really appreciate you coming in and sharing this, and I'm hoping that you'll come back and your team will come back, or we can come see some stuff in your demo rooms.
I love that.
To really share what's happening over at Dignity, YRMC, both East and West, as you guys slowly roll out the technology. I think you're doing it room by room.
We're doing it really floor by floor. Right now it's live on the 3rd floor at the West Campus, and our next floor to go live will be the 4th floor. And then I believe in 2024, which is coming really soon,
it is.
The East Campus will be going live with it then too.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming in. Christie King, you are the 3rd floor manager of medical surgical telemetry at YRMC West.
Yes.
And we look forward to speaking with you and your team again soon.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you.